UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Ecker, MUFON State Director for New York Chris DePerno, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Well, good evening. Greatest audience on the planet. As always, it's a privilege to join these fine hosts that I do this show with, as well as the great audience out there spread across the globe that checks into this show, UAP Crossfire. And once again, a very special note that we are in Holy Week for those that are Christians that are following it for the Easter holiday that comes this weekend. Holy Thursday tonight. It is the third week of Ramadan, which is just about the end for the followers of Islam. So it's a rather poignant time to bring this subject up of UFOs and the Bible. Now, how this show came about is we are very happy to see Mr. Don Ecker, Decker to most of us, who is recovered sufficiently to join us tonight and is in good vim and vigor. If the pre-show was a show, it would sell great tickets, as he tried to give me an atomic wedgie before we got on the show in a virtual sense. Obviously, we're not in the same room for that to happen. I think I may have actually embarrassed Chris just a tiny bit when I brought up the atomic wedgie. I mean, he had to think about that. And Martin.
Yeah, I got a thing going on.
And we're glad to see Martin, who is from his Southern Command post in the great state of South Carolina. Chris, who's bringing it in from the very balmy and beautiful upstate New York, which is just lovely. This time
it's sunny and cold today. Sunny and cold.
But we're fortunate to all be together tonight, and I'm very thankful for that. I will put out, we have a very special guest that Martin was able to bring in on this subject. They'll be joining us at the top of the hour. And we're excited to have him on, and we'll have a good intro when he comes on. And before I forget, I always want to throw this in because we jam towards the end of the show so often. And I always try to close my shows, especially the ones that I host here and my own shows. God's peace that surpasses all knowledge and understanding. And I bring that up early because what we talk about to some Christians, to many faiths, it can be very disconcerting. Does the Bible reference extraterrestrial activity? And what led me to this is that while we were coming up with the show, and we had a lot. This was definitely a herding the cats kind of week, trying to get all of us together. It was our challenge as we were coming down on a number of things. This has been one of the areas where I have been probably most at peace from the time of being a very young man, growing up Roman Catholic at the time. And I grew up in a household that extraterrestrials, UFOs, anybody who knows me for a long period of time knows that I always honor my dad on this, because my dad was just very taken with the subject in the 60s. So I grew up in a house with Don's Magazine. I'm sure countless paperbacks that were the story of the day. And then a book came out by Eric von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods. It was followed up by a movie. There was a couple other parts in that. And he brought up countless pieces of what he considered were evidence to prove that we had this existence, or we had this exchange going back to ancient times, and it was recorded in holy scriptures of various faiths. So that's what got us kind of started on this show. There's a picture that Skywatcher has. If he has a chance, he can throw it up. It's one of the more famous pictures, and I think it's very poignant. On the top part, you see the depiction of the crucifixion, which will be remembered tomorrow on Holy Good Friday. And on the upper left and right-hand corners, you see the two insert pictures on the bottom. This is it's a wall mural in a cathedral in France. And when I saw this, and later on became a pilot, if you look at the occupants in those two different vehicles, or what appear to be vehicles, their hands are in positions that are very interesting when you consider how we control and manipulate aircraft and flight controls of some kind in their positioning. So that picture, when that was in the book, and then I saw that in a movie theater shortly after the book was out, really caught me and really got me always in the back of my mind. I have found it completely compatible to believe that extraterrestrials are part of God's plan, part of the universe that is created by this entity God. And I didn't find it as a competing thing. I've used the same kind of thought process when we talk about spiritual activities, because of angels, demons that are mentioned, that are driven out, angels that have visited. I find it all compatible with it. I will put a number of questions out through the course of our discussion tonight, but I'm going to turn this over to my guest hosts in a second. There's two people I do want to recognize. One is Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. If you had followed my earlier show, he was one of my guests. He has written a very interesting book about extraterrestrials. He he shared his experiences and what he believes has occurred to him, and he's a friend of Skywatchers, and he was a lovely guest, and I really formed a very nice friendship with him. And another one that was interesting, I'm going to show the book in a second here, is Reverend Dan Carlson. This is his book. The way I found him is he is one of the in the last 2-3 weeks contacted me on the email after one of the shows, and he started a conversation with me with a couple other people about some of the things that we talked about, and he and I picked up a pretty lengthy conversation. And I always tell that to the audience who are key tonight. If you are interested or you have a comment, happy, sad, good, bad, please feel free. Commander Cobra, KGRADB@gmail, and you can get a hold of me. And I will be looking. I will be looking at the chat tonight from our audience for inputs and questions. Unfortunately, I'm not able to interact directly, but please go on. So I will start out with Chris. Chris, what are your thoughts about extraterrestrials recorded in the good book and other holy torts?
Well, I actually think that there's some evidence in the good book that shows that extraterrestrials are in it. Now, the big question is, as you said, can extraterrestrials be demons? Are they demons cloaking themselves as everything? Because we know in the book that says Satan is the great hoaxer. He can manipulate things. He can bring things into this world that makes us believe certain things. Now, I will tell you from my own experiences, I believe in good and evil, and I believe angels and demons. And as a police officer, I think I've seen enough evil to make me convinced that there's absolute demons that are on this earth that do evil. Now, how do you say that? Well, I will tell you that I think I met a demon. I mean, a man who did such a heinous crime. But when I was interviewing him, and this is the first time I'm going to say this on air, when I interviewed him and he finally confessed to it, his eyes changed. And I mean, I wasn't far away. I was almost nose to nose to him. And he looked right into my eyes and smiled. And they found me dry heaving in the bathroom. Because, I mean, I guess you had to be there to actually see it. But I saw it, and that convinced me that there's evil in this world, demons in this world, and there's good in this world. But I think as we look forth as the ET, can it be something that the good book has told us to either be aware of or cautious of, or be able to look at this with open eyes and not run right in and say yes this and yes that. I'm a spiritual guy, so I kind of take things at face value as sometimes, but I also keep an open mind to it. But I will say that I think there's enough evidence in the book to allow us to open that thought. And one other thing I want to say, and I'll probably mention this later in the show, a lot of abductees have used the word Jesus as they're being abducted, and the abduction stops. It disappears. And Joe Jordan, who I've spoken to down in Florida, who's done probably hundreds of abduction cases, and myself, I've done a tremendous amount of abduction cases. Kathleen Martin has also taught me the same thing. Says that as some cases where they invoke the word Jesus or God, the abductions abruptly stop.
It's interesting. One thing I will say, Chris, that you have brought this that experience you had up, and it matches very close to something that Paul Eno talked about in the many exorcisms that he assisted in when he was a seminarian. That connection, and something that he was told that he had to prepare himself to be guard against. That kind of connection that occurs, that you have that linking up with this evil. And
go ahead. I agree with you, Commander. I think I wasn't prepared for it.
Sure.
And I think it's something that we all should start looking at.
Another situation that it reminds me of. I won't mention his name because I haven't spoken to him in a bit. He wrote a number of books on the possessed doll that's down in Key West.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And Robert the doll.
Yeah.
And he was on one of the. Every year they take it out of the case and they do like an inventory inspection on it. And he talks about dealing with this moment where he knows that the face of this doll transformed, and he experienced this, and he used to do a lot of haunted tours, and he would prepare himself going in and out, and on one he didn't, and he felt that he was plagued for quite a while. Very, very nice guy, very interesting series of books that he's written. And again, when I hear the way you describe it is the way they have described it to me, that what they had in that experience. And I think
is there a lot of similarities?
It is. And I think that just kind of ties to a lot. Now, Don, I think you have a very, you shared it before, and we've heard you talking before on this. The book of Enoch has a lot of interesting passages that I think line up. When you look into the Bible, the Neraphim, Seraphim, the offspring that is talked about between angels or celestial beings and women on earth, there's a lot there. I think it's recorded in the Bible pretty clearly that we know that there were people that were giants. David slew one, which is a very famous Bible story. So pick it up and help the audience know where you're coming at on this, because I think you have a very unique perspective.
Okay, but before I do, there's something else I feel compelled to mention. This was on Easter week,
right?
52 years ago, in the former Republic of Vietnam. I was a member of a 9-man team situated up on the demilitarized zone in a camp called A4 or Alpha 4. We were conducting intelligence operations up there. And on the 30th of March, the North Vietnamese communists launched what today is known as the Easter Offensive.
Right.
And subsequently, our camp was overrun. Now, there's too much there to even try to articulate about, because unless you were there, you wouldn't understand the complete chaos, terror, and so forth. But the team, although we did have a couple of guys that got hurt, not fatally, thank God, but a couple of guys did get banged up. We were able to exfiltrate out of the camp. We had called in for an emergency evacuation, and subsequently we were picked up by some UE helicopters. All well and good. We were taken to our parent unit in Fubai the next day, like a complete, total dumbass. I volunteered to go up to our facility that we had in Quangtree, which was below the DMZ, but above our parent unit in Fubai. And I had to take some explosives up there because we were afraid, or the military, our command authority was afraid that this place was going to get hit next, which it did. Now, we had top secret equipment up there, crypto gear. And this stuff, it just couldn't be allowed to fall into enemy hands. So these explosives I took up was to destroy that equipment and then see what happens. We probably were going to be pulled out of there. However, while up there, I was promoted to the non-commissioned officer in charge of our reactionary platoon. We were expecting to get hit, to get probed, and the situation was really, really dire. So the night, April Fool's Day, as a matter of fact, I spent the entire night out on the perimeter. I had a South Vietnamese, we called them Rough Puffs. They were like National Guard, okay, or militia. This kid, and he was a young kid, had an M1 carbine from World War II, and he had a M8 Willie Pete grenade. I'll never forget this, strapped to his web belt. And we spent the whole night. Now, he could barely speak any English. I spoke TT Vietnamese, very little Vietnamese, but some. And we spent the whole night out there patrolling around. We had some things happen, but that's not for here. So that morning, about 4:30, I went back to our command bunker and scrounged up a ration. I hadn't eaten in a day or two. Had that ration, laid down for about an hour, and then got up. Now, this entire time we were being shelled. I guess it was maybe 8:30, and I was still in the bunker, and I heard a couple of booms and bangs. Now, these weren't incoming. These were, it sounded like grenades, enemy grenades. And I grabbed my weapon. I had an old M3A1 grease gun, a 45 caliber submachine gun. I grabbed that thing and went charging outside. And just as I got out in front of the bunker, honest to God, I heard one coming in. And it sounded like a freight train. And anybody that's ever been under fire will know what I'm talking about. And this thing slammed, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 feet behind me. And then suddenly, as this thing is going off, I felt like somebody slammed me in the chest with a ball bat. Well, next thing I knew, I'm laying face down in the dirt, and I am hurting like, you wouldn't believe. Now, I looked up. Now, remember, this is Easter Sunday, April the 2nd, 1972. I looked up, and I saw the guy that shot me. He was a Vietnamese, crawling, and he had a buddy with him, crawling through the razor wire. And the rifle he had was an SKS carbine. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's a semi-automatic rifle that the Soviets, basically the Russians, developed right around the end of World War II. They had discovered the German Sturmgewehr 44, which was a brand new rifle, the world's first assault rifle the Germans had made. And they basically copied the ammunition. Then they made the gun to fit it in. And this ammunition was called an intermediate round. Okay, they took a full-blown rifle cartridge and in essence cut it in half, made a brand new cartridge with less powder, although the same bullet. Okay, and hey, it worked great. Well, he had shot me with one of these, and I'm laying there, and on the end of his rifle was this huge bayonet, a triangular, permanently attached under the barrel bayonet. And the only thing in my mind I could think of is, my God, that guy's going to come in and stick it in me. Okay, he's going to finish the job. And stuff is going off everywhere. Well, I did have a pistol. I had a 45. And my left arm wasn't working, but the 45 was on my right. And I pulled that out, and I emptied the magazine at both these guys. They both dropped. Now, did I get them? I probably did. And I wasn't going to go check, even if I could have been able to. But they didn't get back up. And somebody in the bunker heard the shooting. As a matter of fact, it was the first sergeant. Now that I think about it, he ran out, grabbed me, and dragged me back inside. And they called for a medevac. They got a medic in there. He started applying first aid. Long story short, they put me on a chopper. They flew me out to Fubai. And the wounds were too bad, so they had to fly me to Da Nang. And there was a big army hospital there. Now, the purpose of all this, you're going to hear in a second. I get to Da Nang, okay, they wheel me right into surgery. And the first thing they do, they know, they take a look, they know they got to operate. So they apply anesthesia, which killed me, actually killed me. The anesthesia reacted with the food I had eaten that morning, early in the morning. And if you've ever been in elective surgery or anything, you know they'll tell you, don't eat anything 18 to 24 hours before you come in to be operated on because of the anesthesia. Well, I started vomiting. I'm under, okay? I was out like a light, but I started vomiting so violently that I literally woke up in my mind, gagging. I was choking to death, and that stopped my heart. Now, this is the part that's going to sound unbelievable. The next thing I knew, I'm floating up in the air, maybe 10 or 15 feet. I'm looking down, and I see them working on somebody. I didn't know who it was at first. To be honest, I didn't care. I had never been so peaceful or at peace my entire existence. Well, suddenly I felt something grab me and push me back. Swear to God, this is the truth. This is what I remember. And this deep baritone voice said, "Your work here is not yet complete." Boom. Next thing I knew, I'm coming awake in the intensive care facility there. This nurse came in and she walked up to the bed. I didn't know her from Adam. And she said, "Don," she said, "I've been looking for you for a long time." I'm not going to say her last name, but her first name was Mary. And I had no clue what this woman was talking about. And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you're from my hometown, or I'm from your hometown." She had checked all the casualties every day to see if anybody came from that part of Pennsylvania. And I was it, the first one she ever ran into. So then she told me, she said, "You know, we lost you. We lost you for almost 2 minutes before we could bring you back." And, you know, I'm groggy, I'm half out of it. And I swear to God, I didn't remember any of that then for about 3 or 4 years. It was 3 or 4 years later when this came back to me.
Jeez.
So, Easter, I died and I resurrected. And every year at this time, okay, every year at this time of the year, I go through about 3 weeks of really deep, dark depression. And this started about 25 years ago, and I'm thankful that this is soon going to be over. I want to get the hell out of that. Now, to get back to the Bible. Okay. In October of 1989, I made my first appearance on Larry King Live. And that night, Larry King was not there. He was on his probably 4th wedding and honeymoon, okay? This guy would get married and divorced and married and divorced like I changed my tennis shoes, all right? So they had Pat Buchanan, who incidentally in 1992 ran trying to get the presidential nomination from the Republican Party, but he was the guy hosting the show. And during that show, I mentioned toward the end, and the show was about a UFO landing in the still Soviet Union city of Voronezh. All right. Bill, if you'd flash that cover of the book, please. I mentioned having picked up and read a book by a guy by the name of Zecharia Sitchin called The 12th Planet. And let me tell you what, 2 things changed my life in the last 50 years. Number 1 was reading that book, and number 2 was buying my first computer. All right. Now, after that show, about a week later, I get a letter at UFO Magazine from Sitchin, and he was thanking me, and he said, "I really appreciate you having mentioned my book." He said, "That was very gracious of you," and blah, 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 right? Well, I found out he was coming out to the coast on one of his speaking events. We made arrangements to meet. Later, in 1995, at my Spy Fest in Orlando, Florida, an intelligence operation, we'll have to talk about that sometime, okay, where we were being surveilled. It's such an incredible story. You'll think I'm nuts, but
well, you've shared part of that. You've shared part of that with us in the past.
Yeah.
Well,
but,
like 18 of you in a gigantic auditorium.
You're right. Yeah, well, that was a hell of a story. But anyway, Sitchin became a very dear friend. And Bill, pop up the picture of Zecharia and I, please. Yeah, there he is. Now that man.
And we just want for the audience to understand that is you with the dark tie.
Yeah, and the mustache.
And the mustache.
Oh, wait, he had a mustache too. I've got the dark mustache.
Dark mustache and dark tie.
Yeah. So anyway, Sitchin was an amazing man. He was Jewish that had been born in the Ukraine. Somehow his family were able to get out of Russia. Okay. I don't know if they escaped or how they pulled it off, but they got out. Ended up going to the UK, to the United Kingdom, where Sitchin ended up going to the London School of Economics. Now, one day, when he was out here on the coast, we were having lunch. And I asked him very pointedly, I said, "Zecharia," I said, "how did you become involved in this business with the Anunnaki, the Sumerians, the cities of Sumeria, the ancient cities, the first ones that we knew of," okay? And at that period of time, academia still was proclaiming that Sumeria was the world's first civilization, going back 6,000 years. Now, that never made sense to me, even when I was in college, quite frankly, because, number one, there were other places around that we knew about. The city of Jericho, which even academia said went back at that time 9,000 years. Well, wait a minute. You got Sumeria here, 6,000 years old. You got this other city over here, Jericho, that they think is 9,000. How does that compute? Well, it didn't compute to me. But at any rate, this is what they were teaching long before Göbekli Tepe or these other astounding finds that we've since made.
Right.
So he told me he was in a religious class, and he didn't say it exactly, but I'm sure he was preparing for his bar mitzvah or something, was being instructed by a rabbi, and got into the argument with the rabbi about, of all things, what we, if we're Christian, know to be Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And in that, if you read it, excuse me, in your Bible, you will see that the sons of God, okay, look down upon basically the land of man, observed the women, and they became very aroused. They found the earth women very attractive. And one of them said, hey, let's go down there and take as many of these gals as we can grab, okay? And subsequently, after having sexual relations with them, they had progeny born, all right? And these became the men of great renown, known as the Nephilim, all right? Now, that's a pretty explosive passage in the Bible, but only one of many. Now, what does that mean? Well, it basically means that apparently extraterrestrials had come to the earth, okay, and they must have been physiologically very similar to us, and they found that they were compatible with human females. Now, that's just one little part of it, but Sitchin took it back much further. He was an ancient language linguist, and this man traveled literally all around the globe to these ancient sites, discovering, well, what could only be a forgotten history, okay, of what went on many, many millennia ago. Now, according to the records that Sitchin read, he found out that these ETs, apparently they must have been, were called by at least the Sumerians the Anunnaki, which means those who from heaven to earth came. In other words, they came down out of the sky. And the ancients worshipped these beings as gods. Now, the chief god among them was a guy by the name of Anu, or An. Now, this in itself is very interesting. If you know anything about ancient Egypt, okay, there was a pharaoh that originally, after his father died, took over the reins of kingship in Egypt by the name of Amenhotep IV. But this guy had a different idea. And how he came across this idea, God only knows, no pun intended. But he changed his name to Akhenaten, okay? And which meant a believer or a worshiper of the god Atun, all right, the solar disk. He completely turned Egyptian society literally upside down, inside out. They moved the capital to an area now known as Amarna. They built the city from the dust and the dirt. As a matter of fact, I recently read a very unusual historical fact about that while this area is still undergoing archaeological expeditions, many, many, many graves were discovered of very young people that had died as a result of not only malnutrition, but many bodily bone breaks and stuff. In other words, he basically worked these people to death to make his capital city. Now, he didn't quite make 20 years, all right? He was also the guy married to that legendary beauty, Nefertiti, all right? And King Tutankhamun was his son to one of his wives. Now, in those days, okay, the royalty married within their own families in the mistaken belief they could keep their blood pure, not realizing the type of damage they were doing to the offspring. I mean, having sexual relations with your sister or your mother or a close family relative, it basically destroyed the family line ultimately. But King Tut, all right, later his father mysteriously died. There was an interim pharaoh, and then Tut came along, and he only lived until he was about 19. And there's a lot of mystery about what happened after that. But these people were all originally worshiping many gods, then the one god, and then after Tut came to power, he was basically forced to reinstate the old religions. Now, let's talk about some of those gods, okay? An, had two chief sons. They were named Enlil and Enki. And these gods were sent down to earth. Enlil had the overall control of the whole planet. Enki was given another area. Now, there was a lot of contention, according to the records of these gods. And they were here to basically rape the planet of its mineral and other resources. Now, that sounds pretty heady. What do you mean, rape the planet? Well, they were primarily looking for gold. Now, what in the hell would they want gold for? Okay, granted, it's good in electronics and that type of thing. But according to the records Sitchin translated, they had a process, excuse me, that their planet, Nibiru, the reason they left Nibiru to come to Earth was because its atmosphere was basically disintegrating. It sounds to me like they were losing their ozone layer. Perhaps the rays from the sun, okay, were creating problems for them. They intended to sprinkle this gold into their atmosphere through some process to help shield the planet. Now, this planet, Nibiru, according to Sitchin, had a very vast, long-range orbit around our sun, 3,600 years to make one revolution. And according to the old records, these gods were here for practically forever, arriving 420,000 years ago, give or take. And now we're in the anywhere from 2000 BC up to about 1000 BC. And these guys were still in evidence. Now, they brought with them workers from their planet called the Ajiji. And after back-breaking toil and labor, the Ajiji revolted and claimed that they just couldn't do it anymore. We're not working like that. Well, the gods, air quote, the gods decided we are going to create workers. And according to the records, they took early proto-humans genetically tinkered with them, okay, and Homo sapiens sapien was the end result. Now, when you hear stuff like this, okay, there's no way I could prove any of this except for what were in the records. You've got to keep an open mind, all right? A lot of people will get very, very distressed and even angry hearing this because it's impacting their long-held beliefs that they learned in church. I'll give you an example. Before I met my wife, okay, I had been dating a girl that came. This was after my son died, and I ultimately ended up getting divorced. I was dating a girl who had originally come from Canada, and her mother had come down to visit. Now, they were staunch Roman Catholics. And one day we were sitting in my townhouse, we were having a cup of coffee, and we were talking about religion, which is always a bad idea, all right? And she had said something detrimental about Jewish people. And I said, hey, look, I said, how can you even say that? Jesus, the Messiah, was a Jew. And I'll never forget the look, and God's truth, of horror that washed over her face. And she said vehemently, no, he wasn't. He was Roman Catholic. I gotta tell you, a true believer, right? Roman Catholic. The woman didn't even realize what in the hell she said, all right? But she just couldn't accept that Jesus Christ was a Jew. Now, incidentally, if you trace the Jewish people, the Hebrews, back in time, they originally emanated from Sumeria, okay? Abraham, all right, the father of all the Israeli peoples, originally came from the city of Ur on the Chaldees, all right? They were then called the Haparu, all right? Or those people who wandered. And of course, Abraham and his family and flocks and what have you ended up doing that very thing, wandering, all right? But there's so much about history that we don't know. Now, human beings being created to be what? Originally, slave labor. And these various secondary and even third gods that came down to earth began their own cults, all right? And like I said, the Anunnaki did not get along with each other. There was a lot of warfare among them. And how did they conduct that warfare? By their human devotees, all right? They arranged them into various armies. As a matter of fact, I think it was, and I'd have to go back and check my files, around 2500 BC. And it was Sitchin that originally turned me onto this fact. There is clear evidence that at one point in the Middle East, okay, it might have been somewhere between what today is Syria and Iraq today, all right, there is a spot where a nuclear device was detonated. And this wasn't the only one, all right? There's also a spot in India. If you know anything about the Indian Vedic records, all right, there was apparently an atomic device that was detonated up there. So these bastards, Anunnaki, brought their religion, I guess you could say, their angry, spiteful relations with each other. They brought it down here to Earth. Now, if you know anything about the human history, human Homo sapiens sapien, we've been a warring race forever, okay? Right now, today, we've got wars going on in a number of spots around the globe. When the news reports it, like, for example, in Yemen, the Houthis, okay, an Islamic terrorist group, are trying to sink vessels in the Red Sea, and they're attacking shipping out there. Things like this, the Ukraine, another place that's being decimated by the warfare between the Ukrainians and the Russians. It's horrible. And I kind of think that it's a result going back many, many, many thousands of years. Now, somebody's going to say, Ecker, how do you know, what makes you think that they were here looking for gold? Well, do you know that in South Africa, an ancient mine dated back over 300,000 years ago, okay, something or someone was mining gold there. Now, what good was gold to primitive people? They couldn't make tools from it. It's too soft. They couldn't make weapons from it. It's too soft. What did they do with it? Well, they made jewelry and things like that. But as far as a useful metal, it wasn't. And if it wasn't, then who the hell would have been mining it over 300,000 years ago? Okay, which to me tells me that somebody sure did, and they must have had a good reason to do it. Now, we as human beings today, hey, what a contentious bunch of assholes we are. All right, just take a look around today in the United States. It used to be that people with two different ideas may have disagreed with each other, but they could have sat down and discussed it. Well, that ship has sailed.
All right, Don, I got to grab it from you because I want to get Martin in on this. Now,
Sure.
Martin who? Oh,
Martin,
oh,
Martin, you got 2 minutes.
yeah, I know. Well, our guest has been in here the whole entire time.
No. The guest is
I know,
coming in
but
the
I'm
top
just,
of the hour.
I'm just letting you know.
I
Yeah.
want. I completely
Because
already
no
talked
one
to the
was
guest.
looking at my private chat, so
Nope,
I just
nope,
thought
I
I'd
already
throw
talked
that
with our
out there.
guest. Martin, question. You come from a fairly agnostic kind of view to all this stuff that we've been talking about. And I want to get back to UFOs in the Bible. Don, as I've heard, and Don's explained this history. What do you see when you hear these discussions and these different things go on? And for in the chat, I think it's B Baker. I apologize. I'm jumping back and forth between the two. I did hear the interpretation of that first picture that I put up of the angel, the sun, and the moon in that depiction in the church, and I'm comfortable with that if that's the reasoning behind it. I find it absolutely intriguing though when I look at that picture, and that's what was the opening of the show. So, Martin, what do you think when you look at all this?
Well, first of all, I want to say eventually when it downloads, I have a video I'm going to pull up that I made on just, these Renaissance paintings that have what looks like a UFO. And you're right, there are people that have that study that, those type of paintings, right, and think that there's, suns and moons and things like that, other things depicted. Right. But anyway, well, first of all, Don's gone right now, but I part of his story was
I'm here. I'm right here.
Don, that really about your what do they call
near death
NDE experience. Boy, that is really something, and I'd love to talk to you more about that sometime in the future. And sorry to hear when you said about your son. I can't even imagine. But when it comes to Zachariah Stitchin, I've never really looked into that type of thing. I guess I assumed that a lot of it was just kind of out there, to be honest with you. So about the Anunnaki and the Nibru and all that. It just seems like, where is he getting the information from? I've always thought that type of thing. I do believe we were hunters and gatherers for a while, and then we started settling into these little societies. And you're probably right, Don. It probably does go way back more than the 6,500 years that they talk about, but I don't know exactly when there became societies enough to work together to survive, that type of thing.
Well, don't forget the Great Flood, roughly 11,600 years ago, that basically practically covered the whole world. We lost millions and millions of miles of land as a result of the waters. And we know that it happened. Something happened terribly. But I personally believe, and we've touched on it and I'm going to shut up here, but we touched on it a couple of times. I firmly believe that there was advanced, and I'm not saying how advanced, but advanced civilizations that were destroyed before.
I believe that's very much a possibility too, because there's a lot of empty time out there where things could have happened. We're talking, the Earth is, what is it, 4.8 billion? I can't even remember.
4.5.
But anyway, we have all this time where things could have happened. And then we had, ice ages. We had all kinds of things that could have been, a volcanism of the whole entire planet for some reason or another at some point that wiped out any evidence of earlier, civilizations. It's very possible there could have been other intelligent civilizations here. I do agree with that. As far as, the Bible, I got to say, I don't know enough about the Bible. I know Ezekiel. I've heard of the accounts of Ezekiel and things like that, but I've never really looked into any part of the Bible when it comes to UFOs. But our guest, as we'll bring up later, he's waiting in the back. He will be able to talk on that topic a lot. So I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Your take, the Bible as a historical reference. You talk about Ezekiel. I think that's probably one of the great spots to look when you're looking for that. I would even say that if you look at other books that are not in the King James Bible that you find in Catholic and others, if you look at Gnostic writings, all of them along that, even the Talmud, there is a lot there. I mean, what Don was talking about with Mr. Kitchen's rabbinical encounter, what he read, those things are there. So do you see it as a possible source? Yay or nay?
I think it's a possible source, but the Bible was written by people,
right?
And there was a lot of, and you talk about King James, he came along and changed so many things that were in there prior to that. And
the Old Testament, gentlemen, the Old Testament almost entirely emanated from Samaria,
right? And then Hebrew compilation of the Sumerian works.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's interesting. It's all fascinating to me. I was excited to do this show.
So you don't
hear and learn.
So what I'm getting at is you don't dismiss because it is the Bible. You look at it like you do any other source, like you look at artwork, whatever, to say what is the inspiration of this record that's being put. Is that fair?
Well, a lot of things, I think in the past, a lot of things were explained because it was unknown and it was hard. Think what they did when there was an eclipse. They thought the sun god was angry at them and stuff like that. So there was always explanations that we didn't understand that would fit in the use of God in the Bible, and not the Bible, but in God or spirits or.
Well, I dropped a couple of bombshells, and I'm shocked that none of you guys picked up on it. And that is the fact that at some point in Earth's past, we were nuked.
I heard you say it, but how do you know that? That was like the gentleman that was on this show saying that Mars was nuked. Where is, there are things that could explain it.
That gentleman, Martin, is one of the premier Mars scientists around, John Brandenburg, and he proved it through Xenon 129, which can only come from two places. Number one, a supernova. Number two, a hydrogen warhead.
I talked with Mark D'Antonio about that. He knows all about him and that theory and everything, and he believes could be other answers for that. I mean,
What
I
are
understand
they?
he's
What
written.
are they? What
Well,
are
he
they?
did tell me, but I can't remember them.
Oh, well, we're not going off topic. No, we're not. We're sticking with the show because you guys put me through a lot to get everybody together, and I want Chris. You're going to walk us out the last 2 minutes. What's your take?
What? I'm what?
What's your Give me your take on the Bible as a record of extraterrestrial encounters.
We're all going to hell. How's that? No.
Beautiful. Well, I guess that's done. Thanks everybody for showing up. I hope you'll stick around for the second hour.
My buddy Martin says, "Screw all that. There's no such thing." I mean, no, come on. I'm just joking. But when you talk about the Bible and UFOs, the Bible mentions stuff that we could take as UFOs or spiritual or whatever. There is some correlation to that. Now, there's astrophysicists out there. There's Pentagon people who believe that there's no such thing as aliens. I'm not sure that's true in my own belief. I kind of believe that if God would make other races somewhere, I mean, he can say, I really screwed up on these humans. Boy, look at them. All right, let me try it over on this planet over here, and let me try it on that planet over there. And, it could be the reverse. Maybe he thought those guys were all screwed up and he made us. I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is a mystery. Nobody is an expert at this. Nobody is. But I will say that I think there's a lot of stuff that you could take from the Bible and say, wow, you can apply it to certain, extraterrestrial theories, and then take some of what I got to tell you, why do abductionists, and I said this in the beginning, why do abductionists say if I invoke the name Jesus or God, it stops?
Well, I'm going to grab you there because I think our next guest, John Myler, might have an interesting aspect. And I will just say that if you are a believer in the power of Christ, that would give you the power to get control of that situation. But we're at our break. UAP Crossfire, a very interesting Holy Week show, and I look forward to seeing you all on the flip side. Please keep your comments coming into the chat room, and I'll try to keep reacting to them. But we have a special guest, John Myler, who will be joining us on the backside. Martin will be introducing him. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire. I am with my co-host, Chris DePerno, Martin, and Don Ecker. I am Commander Cobra. It's been a interesting and fun show, and we have a great guest. Martin, please bring our special guest in. I really appreciate him answering the call very late in the day to jump in with us.
Yes, that's right. John Myler, I believe that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure. He'll correct me on that. The Commander Sergeant, retired, California Cyber Operations Chief, retired, 144th Fighter Wing, U.S. Western Air Defense Sector, PG&E Cybersecurity Analyst, et cetera, author, screenwriter, and he's joining us now. He has written a book basically pertaining to what we are talking about tonight. Welcome to the show, John.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, actually, it's 4 books that cover the Christian UFO perspective.
Okay.
John, how did you get started in this particular area of study? Because I've read some of the things that Martin put together, and he sent me some information last night. I haven't read your books yet, but I will. They're going to be on my list. How'd you get started?
Okay. Well, I'd always been spiritually inclined, but I will go back to an early event that happened when I was 5. I was at my great-grandmother's house, and so let me explain my great-grandmother a little bit. She's from the Bible Belt, and this was at a time when I would be watched over their house periodically, and then there was a family gathering there on this particular evening back in 1975. And with the whole house full of people, everybody talking and a lot of noise and multiple conversations going on, my grandmother was reading a newspaper article sitting on the couch, my great-grandmother. And she said, "Okay, everybody, listen up. I have an announcement to make to everyone." And everybody's like, "Okay, well, Grandma, patriarch of the family." So My great-grandmother was the wife of a minister, so my great-grandfather was there on this evening as well, and he was a minister, and for like 30 some odd years they traveled all over the United States preaching the gospel, big tent revivals. I mean, if there was music playing in the house, it was gospel. She knew how to play the piano, all gospel songs. If the TV was on, it was an evangelist. She like lived, breathed, dreamed. Every waking moment of her life was consumed with Jesus. And she was as much of a believer as you can possibly imagine a person is capable of being. And she even had a personal testimony herself that when she was younger, not too much younger, that she almost died of a heart attack. She had a stroke and it almost killed her. And when she was in the hospital, she said Jesus physically walked into her hospital room and smiled at her. She was paralyzed on the whole left side of her body. They didn't know if she would ever talk again, much less walk. But Jesus smiled at her, turned around and walked out. And she was instantly healed. So when the doctors came back into her room, she's all sitting up, ready to go, talking, moving around, everything perfectly normal. And they're like, oh, what happened? She said, Jesus came in and healed me. And so she was very open and vocal about it, like making sure everybody knew about, hey, this is a fantastic miracle that God did for her. And she was so grateful about this. So this I understood, and I believed her. Grandma wouldn't lie. And of course, it'd be kind of hard to lie about, having a stroke and then getting healed like the next day. This was the kind of person she was. She also had an angelic encounter story where an angel saved her life, physically rolled her over in the bed. She was dying from carbon monoxide poisoning, and a person dressed in a military uniform wearing a pickle hob helmet, so a military type uniform, so strange, but very specific in her description, said this person came in and grabbed her and rolled her over and she could instantly start breathing again. And then he walked right through the door that was bolt locked. So somehow he just opened the door and shut it and walked out. And so she has these testimonies, and these are the kind of testimonies you could expect from a person who, lived off the side of the road, eating potatoes and stuff during the Great Depression while her parents were taking her all over the place, or while she was going all over the place doing these big tent revivals and stuff. And, that was their life. But on this evening, she said, I have an announcement. And she started to read this article that sounded exactly like the scene in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where the movie starts out, you have the police chase with the car, the cop car chasing the UFO all over the countryside. Apparently something exactly like that happened in Madeira back in 1975. And she read this article, and people were just kind of like looking kind of strange, like, why is Grandma reading an article about a UFO? And when she finished reading the article, she dropped the newspaper and she said, when I was a little girl, I saw a UFO. And then she proceeded to tell everybody in the family what happened, that her and her sister, it was back in like 1910, 100 years ago, that they were walking along Plains of Kentucky. Neither of them had never even seen an automobile before. They lived like out in the sticks, completely not in town or anything. So they were completely away from civilization. They had a wagon that they used. So they'd never seen a vehicle before. They had no frame of reference for what they saw, but they saw this cigar-shaped UFO. She said it had no seams on it whatsoever, perfectly seamless, this beautiful polished aluminum looking cigar shaped thing about 30 feet long with a bubble on top. And they even saw the occupant. It was only like maybe 30 feet away or so, and just flying along above the ground, like maybe 20, 30 feet. And they were close enough to even see the guy inside turn and look at him as he flew by. And then they went over some bluffs. He went over some bluffs and just shot up in the sky and disappeared in like a second, in the blink of an eye. And her and her sister were like, what was that? They were freaking out. And so they ran home and they both told their mother about it. Well, she was like, don't ever mention this to me ever again. Don't ever tell anybody about this story. This is the last I want to hear of this weird stuff. Has no place in our family, period. Done. So her and her sister had this thing to share, but only between each other. And they didn't disobey their mother. They did what she said. Her sister died a couple years later. So, and this was even the first time I heard about that my great-grandmother had a sister. I didn't even know that until she told this testimony. But so her sister died when she was a teenager. And so my grandmother had this all to herself for 60, 70 years. And did she happen to be reading the newspaper and saw this article and read it? And she's like, wait, I know what that is. And it like flipped the switch and she remembered it all came back. And so she said, you know what? I don't care what people think. Those things are real. And so I'm only 5 years old when I hear this story. On the way home, I'm like plugging my mom with all these questions. What's this? What's this? You know, what's a UFO? What are, you know, all this? Well, we were avid Star Trek fan, people. So mom said, well, you know that show we watched, Star Trek? It's probably a little more real than most people think. And so in my young mind, I was just thinking like grandma, okay, Christianity, Jesus, the Bible, that's real. ETs, that's real. And so I kind of grew up that way, but I really went off on this new age tangent, and I got all into paranormal stuff as I grew up. And so the Christian part of my life didn't really come to life until I was 21. And then I had an encounter with Jesus myself. It was the darkest time in my life. I was into all kind of things. I was addicted to everything under the sun. And spiraling downhill. And one night I had a dream. Jesus came to me in this dream. He was invisible in the dream, and he was a series of things where he was showing me stuff in a symbolic way of what was going on in my life. And basically, the end result is if I don't stop doing what I'm doing, I'm either going to end up dead or in jail. But probably dead, because the dream was pretty graphic. And so I woke up from the dream, and the feeling of peace that I had in part of the dream, where he pulled me out of this really horrible place, and I was in this really beautiful, peaceful place, and I felt just so free, and like none of the problems in my life were bothering me. I was like, it was like all this stuff that was on me that I wasn't aware of was just removed, and I got a small taste of that freedom, and then it was put back on me, and then I woke up, and then as I was recalling the dream, I remember sitting in the bed. And I vocalized the question out loud, and I wasn't expecting an answer or anything like that. I remember getting to the part in the dream where the person that was with me, showing me all these things, he was invisible. But I could literally see an indentation in the chair. I could see things that he was moving, but he was invisible. And that struck me as like being really weird. Like to dream about somebody that you're seeing that's with you, but he is not letting you see what he looks like. He's making himself invisible. So I thought, that's weird. And when I got to that part in the dream and I'm remembering it, I said, who was that invisible person? When I asked the question, I heard an answer audibly in my ear, like the whiskers were touching my ear. And the name Jesus entered my ear. And with that name, everything changed in me overnight. I just felt his energy just flush through my body. I felt this immense love, just pure saturated love. So, Dawn, you mentioned like with your near-death experience, you said you felt this incredible peace. It was that level of peace that I felt, but it was just so far beyond just peace. It was love, just the pure essence of love washed through me. So I knew that he was real beyond a shadow of a doubt. And if you would have asked me before this incident, were you a Christian? I would have said, yeah. But did I know what even something as fundamental as the Trinity was? No. I didn't know all these things. I believed kind of evolution, probably. I was all New Agey, and, you know, I literally experimented with astral projection and channeling and reading runes and tarot cards and palmistry and you name it. I knew a lot of these things. I knew how to do these things. And I was into all of this stuff. And UFOs and stuff were on my plate as a huge thing that I knew a lot about. I knew about Zecharia Sitchin and von Däniken. But then when this happened, then I was like, okay, the Bible is real. I have to start reading the Bible. And so I made this checklist of things, you know, okay, I think Christians, they go to church, so I got to find a church. I got to pray every day. I got to start reading the Bible. I got to, you know, I don't know. I was manic, you know, trying to figure out how God actually came to me. You know, I have to change. How all my friends thought I was nuts, you know. It was kind of funny. But anyway, I started reading the Bible, and that's when Genesis chapter 6, you know, very first book, like second page. I'm reading this, and I was like Fox Mulder, right? I had this encyclopedia. I had a literal encyclopedia of the paranormal too when I was a kid that I pretty much memorized. But I had all this information in my head, and I'm reading Genesis 6, and I'm like, I know what this is talking about. This is these angels and, you know, that all the von Däniken stuff. I'm like, yes, that's true. And so before I realized it, I started writing notes and stuff, and I'm taking all these notes and I'm writing these things down. And that became my first book, which I wrote in like 3 days, Aliens in the Bible. And that was my first rendition of this work. But what this turned into is kind of like picking up my great-grandmother's mantle. So my great-grandmother, she never felt like the need to reconcile Christianity with the Bible, or Christianity with the existence of ET. She just believed, okay, they're both real. Me, on the other hand, I ended up seeing a lot of things that are the fruit of this ancient astronaut theory that actually contradict the Bible. For example, a race of ETs created humanity. That's common, and I believe that's both Sitchin and von Däniken believe that. So they're basically saying Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 is wrong. Throw that out. God didn't create humanity. The God who created time, space, the universe, and everything in it is not the God who created humanity as it specifically says in the Bible. So they're redefining God, which is very fundamental. So I picked up on these things pretty soon, and my first book, Aliens of the Bible, was kind of like, yes, there's something real going on here, but I think the majority of this is demonic because it's leading people away from Jesus. It's leading people to pick and choose things in the Bible that they say, okay, this is true, but this is how you understand it, and let's just take God and remove him out of the picture. And then I kept doing research, and I kept getting more information from other people, and I'm like, wait a minute. I might have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. It's not all demonic, and that's a typical response from a lot of Christians to just like put this demonic label on a lot of things, and I'm really averse to doing that. I am an open-minded Christian. I want to evaluate all sides of it, and just because I can't understand something or explain something doesn't mean it's automatically demonic. I've encountered
John,
that.
can I interrupt you there for 1 second? And I apologize for that, but it's something that you said. Yeah. You say that the whole alien thing is trying to push its way away from God. Am I correct that you're saying that?
Yes. No, trying to redefine God so that you think that you're getting closer to God, but you're not.
Okay. But can you actually, I mean, in my belief, I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in God, but I also believe in ufology, in ETs. It doesn't take my spiritual beliefs away from it. Doesn't, I mean, because like I said earlier in the show, I know demons are walking this earth and stuff, and I don't care what anybody says. I know in my heart there's God, there's evil, and there's good. I've seen it all. But I I think a lot of ufologists uh, kind of believe that yes, there is a God, but maybe God, because we don't know, maybe God made other civilizations on other planets
And I believe that.
before us or after us.
Yeah. To
What
be
do you feel
fair,
about
Chris,
that, John?
Chris, hold on. To
Yeah.
be fair, John, I thought you were getting ready to say that you came back, you stepped back, or you broadened your understanding
Yes.
that it's not all demonic. That you had made a rash judgment, like we often do when we look at something. You know, you look at,
Yes.
you made a conclusion, but now you didn't think that. So, Chris, I don't think you caught that
Yeah,
last.
I'm just curious because you wrote a book
Yeah.
called Aliens and the Antichrist, and I'm really
Yes.
fascinated how you actually came about putting aliens with the Antichrist, and that kind of like said, "Oh, I got to ask him that question because that's
Yeah.
an interesting topic."
And another one of my books is called The Strong Delusion, and it's referring to a strong delusion that's going to come overshadow the planet in the end times. And it's something that's always plagued me. Like, how could people be lied to in such a way that people from religions all over the world just suddenly abandon their religion and believe in this new thing? And then people from, agnostics and atheists will believe in it too. Something so powerfully deceptive that it gets people from all walks of life, all religions, all cultures across the planet. And this alien thing would be something that would do just that. If they had some kind of new agey explanation as to how God could be an alien instead of the creator, that, let's say, they misunderstood who Jesus was. He's actually an ET from this other planet out here, and they're really powerful and really advanced. They have really long longevity. And that Jesus will actually return to Earth in the future and say, oh, you got it all wrong. I didn't create the whole universe and everything in it. I am a son of God. So they'll take the same language. I'm a king from another world, which might literally be true, but this will not be the same Jesus that is the real Jesus. The Bible talks about a false prophet that's coming in the future who will be incredibly deceptive. And he will be the one supporting this Antichrist character who's going to be in charge of this deception that's coming. So I really started digging into it. And the more I researched these ETs, the more I saw eschatology, end times, is all over it. Jesus literally said, when I return, one of the signs of my return is it will be like the days of Noah. So out of all of history, he singles out the days of Noah to say the world is going to be like that again. And what's different? The difference there is you had angelic beings from other worlds coming to Earth and interfacing in human society, and people were basically worshiping them. That same deception is coming again. We are going to essentially abandon whatever the Bible teaches about God and about Jesus and believe whatever these beings tell us. So that's what I'm trying to warn people about. And
I respect your thought on that, John. But the agenda, or I should say, the narrative, is calling them a threat. They're not.
Yes, they're not all bad,
the
though.
national security state, the Air Force. Well, the Air Force hasn't said anything. By the way, thank you for your service. But the Air Force hasn't said anything. But the Navy and some of the others are actually
Army.
painting a narrative that they're bad.
right.
Rather than saying
They're obviously
they're
not all bad,
good.
or we wouldn't even be here anymore. So there are factions in the heavens, and the Bible even explains this.
John, I wrote a paper that was released not long ago. I wrote it actually months and months ago about disclosure. I'm sure you're all over the concept of disclosure.
Yep.
Disclosure, I maintain, and I've been in this business a very long time. I was the director of research for UFO Magazine, which my wife and I published here in LA for over 20 years. And disclosure is one of those, I believe, pipe dreams that will never happen for a couple of reasons. Number one, going at least as far back as 47, okay, with the Roswell event, whatever that event was, that the powers that be at that time discovered something that truly terrified them. And as a result, they became extremely concerned that whatever that secret was, if it hit the public, it would be bad for all of humanity, not just we people in America, but around the world. So as a result, ultimately, they surrounded that secret with a special access program. Now, we've got an SAP. Now, we've got enough circumstantial evidence to suggest that is absolutely correct. And basically, my paper says that in my research for over 30 years, all right, I have come to the conclusion that if we are being visited by even one group, there are numerous groups. I've joked and said I think that planet Earth is right off the freeway from the Intergalactic Express. A lot of different types of beings have been witnessed and different types of craft. So the bottom line is not all of those beings get along with each other.
Nope, they don't, and not all of them are bad.
No,
So-
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
What I am saying is that there is conflict even now going on out there. And I think one of the reasons they're trying to keep this quiet, they do not want that known. Now, in my research, and I'll cut this off real soon, there are at least 6, 7 groups of different ETs that have come here, possibly many more, but at least 6 or 7 groups. Several of those groups are very kindly disposed to humanity. A couple of groups are benign. They basically don't care one way or the other. They're here for academic reasons. But there is one group that is inimical toward humanity. For whatever reason, they don't like us. And this is the group, I think, that has instigated conflict.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like as I was mentioning, the Bible even talks about this structure. It mentions 3 heavens. It describes Earth as a multi-dimensional construct. That the sky isn't just like sky with clouds. There is a place called First Heaven in another dimension. So, taking quantum theory into applying quantum theory, we actually have multiple layers of existence here on Earth. In First Heaven, this where we're at right now, we're inside of the Earth. We're like the Earth is an onion of lithospheres. With hell in the heart of the Earth, it's a smaller planet basically. There's not an entire civilization wallowing around in magma. They're on a smaller planet in a lower dimension. In a higher dimension, you have First Heaven, and it's a civilization just like this one's physical world, but there's angelic beings that rule in different areas. And Lucifer is the prince of the power of the air. He has the majority of the power over the whole planet. But there's some areas where there's contention. So it's just like look at politics in the world today. You have wars that are fought and whatnot, different regions where there's different authorities. And in the book of Deuteronomy, I don't have the exact reference, but it says that God divided the regions of the earth, a portion to the watchers, the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. So they're ruling in certain areas. Michael, according to Jewish literature, is over Israel. He's the reason why that little tiny chunk of land still exists, surrounded by enemies that want to wipe them out. So you could kind of get an idea of who's in charge of the country and the heavens by looking at what goes on in that country. A country where there's lots of just wholesale slaughter going on, you know, that's a fallen angel that's over that particular area. areas where there's more freedom, where there's more not as much chaos and death and destruction and killing or war or whatever. Those areas, probably it's an angel that's in charge of that area. But in the book of Daniel, you see Daniel starts praying, and the archangel Gabriel comes to give him a message, but the prince of Persia hinders him. So if you can imagine Earth, he's traveling from outer space. The word Shamim, the heavens, same as outer space. So he's traveling from the glorified realms of the heavens, trying to come to Earth. And as soon as he comes, he's countered by this angelic, demonic, or satanic force headed up by this fallen angel known as the Prince of Persia, who hinders him 21 days. But he finally gets past him when Michael sends forces to fight and help him to get through. He delivers his message to Daniel. Then he has to leave, and he says he has to encounter this dude again to get out. So that kind of gives you this encapsulation of the first heaven realm where there's angelic beings that are there. That said, they could even have bases and stuff and spaceships and everything else in the first heaven on this planet. But I also believe that they're all across the cosmos. So Revelation 12:6 talks about, 6 and 7 talks about the dragon dragged a third of the stars from the sky and threw them to the earth. This is going to happen in the end times. Daniel chapter 8 talks about heavenly forces doing battle with each other in the end times. And it's going to be involving us, and the Antichrist is going to be involved in this as well. So we're actually looking at battles in the future where you're going to have different nations aligned with otherworldly factions, and these battles that are among us here down on Earth are actually going to extend into the heavenly realm, probably even spanning beyond this dimension, but we may even be seeing ships and stuff fighting in the sky, all kind of crazy stuff going on. But there's checks and balances right now. So the enemy totally has enough power to obliterate this planet if he wanted to, but he can't because God is preventing him. And also, his strategy isn't just to destroy humanity. He could have just blown up the planet, right? If that were the case. If God let him, he just would blow us up. But he won't let him because it's about our choice. So you go back to humanity and free will, and what's the whole point of God allowing Satan to do all this stuff to begin with? It's our choice. It's to allow us to choose between him or what the enemy has to offer. And that is a delicate balance. And you see these skirmishes, like these abductions that happen in the middle of the night. Why do they sneak around like that? It's because they're like going under the wire. They're not supposed to do that. So then when they get abducted and somebody says, "In the name of Jesus, I cast you out," they freak out. They deposit the human back down on the earth and they bug out because they know that angels are going to come and get them, apprehend them, and imprison them. So they seriously don't want that. So they act like demons, these that are doing this illegal stuff. But on the flip side, there's a glory side to this too, because God's good guys are in the picture also. You see them in Ezekiel chapter 1 and Ezekiel chapter 10. Those were God's glorified angels there. Those were God's glorified angels appearing to Daniel, giving him his message. Every instance in the Bible of a glorified angel talking to a person, there's most likely UFOs going on. 2 Kings, where you see this chariot. Angelic chariot does not look like a chariot. They use that word chariot in a generic sense. Angelic vehicle. So the Bible literally says angels use vehicles. So you get all of this stuff. This is where Zechariah Sitchin and Von Doniken are correct. You can read all of these things in the Bible and you say, yes, these are God's manifestations here, but they're angels. They're not God. They take it the step further and they say, okay, this is God. But I'm like, wait a minute. It's not God. God delegates a lot of things to angels, like that giant column that floated over Israel, that split the Red Sea, that fed the Israelites in the desert for 40 years. That was probably a UFO. Angels were doing all of that. But God was there. He probably bop in and out whenever, because God's a very personal being. I mean, that's why he became a human being.
1 second.
John, I want to ask you a question, if I may.
Yeah.
And I respect everything you're saying. You you mentioned interdimensional as you talked about hell and everything else at different dimensions, correct?
Yes.
So the flavor of the month, as far as ufology goes, has been the word interdimensional. Started with David Grush. Everybody was thinking off-world aliens, extraterrestrials. Then David Grush comes by and he starts using the word interdimensional. Then a congresswoman comes out and says, "We just had a briefing, and they never said anything about aliens. They said interdimensional." That was a quote right from a congresswoman after a closed door briefing. So you're kind of aligning to that. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And the second question I wanted to ask you is, because you were a command sergeant, right? Master sergeant?
Chief Master Sergeant.
You probably had a top secret clearance because you
Yeah.
worked in cybersecurity. You probably worked at the Pentagon, correct?
No, I did not. I've been to NSA. You know.
All right. Well, there you go. So Lou Elizondo says that he was stopped by people in the Pentagon, in the military, and we're told that, hey, we know what this UFO thing is all about. It's all about demonic entities and heaven and hell and everything. So in your career, you're in, and you've had a tremendous career by what I've read about you. Did you hear that from the Pentagon, from reputable sources, or was that not there?
I heard things through unofficial channels, and I also heard something at a Chiefs conference that I thought was really interesting because somebody accidentally said something you shouldn't have said.
Well, what
And
did he say?
This was in my last year of being in. I was at a Chiefs conference where they had chiefs from the Air Force and Air National Guard all converged. So a lot of them all over the United States were there, and it was a question and answer session, and somebody said something about, are you going to brief us on the mission to Antarctica? And immediately it was like, you didn't say that. Shut your mouth. Not another word. Another discussion, another day, different setting. Done. It was just so, the way he snapped at the guy, and it was just so quick and so like, damn, that's secret. Because most of us then in there had top secret clearance, and the way he treated that guy, I was like, okay, I know a few things about Antarctica from, reading about Admiral Byrd and Steve Quayle's research, and the Nazis supposedly setting up something there and doing all this otherworldly stuff. And apparently we sent an entire fleet there, and they had to turn around because they were under attack and by these ships coming out of the water, spaceships. So I heard all of this stuff. I also heard about radar imagery, or not radar, satellite imaging that has seen a lot of heat under the ice on the west coast of Antarctica. And so they know that something is generating a lot of heat there. The unofficial story is, it's tectonic activity, and that's why you see these big chunks of ice melting and falling that they showed in the Al Gore video. So it had to do with tectonic stuff underneath the ice, not, a hole in the ozone.
The polar bears! Oh my God!
But I've been hearing more and more about Antarctica, and then I recently heard from a researcher, Linda Howe, that was talking about some Navy SEAL whistleblowers that were reporting about these gigantic facilities or giant rooms. They're like 9 acres each. The walls and the ceiling. The walls are 40 feet high. The ceiling, and they're made of this volcanic material with a strange kind of hieroglyphics in it. They're a combination of like Sumerian and Egyptian. They don't understand how these rooms. They said that the walls are made, that this material is somehow impregnated with software code at the molecular level, because when you walk near the wall or you're under the particular part of the ceiling, it illuminates with light. And that there's no support structures, and it's only 4 inches thick. So it's a kind of it's got some kind of force field that it's emanating. And we don't have the technology to decipher how it's doing what it's doing. So this is from apparently these two Navy SEALs and then an archaeologist that was talking to both of them, and it was two separate accounts. So they both gave nearly identical stories, but they didn't even know each other. They went there on an extraction to get somebody and take them out of there. So this I heard on her show, but I actually heard about something in Antarctica that's incredibly classified that's going on over there in Antarctica. Now, I wasn't briefed on any details or anything like that, but through my official channels, I knew about that because of that mention. And then unofficially, I knew somebody who worked at NORAD that said he saw things on the radar and in the upper outer atmosphere. He saw a V formation of school bus-sized objects flying at thousands of miles an hour. This is back in the 80s. So this is long before we had any technology like that.
Well, wait a minute, there, John.
Yeah.
I got to grab you there. We were flying Mach 6 capable vehicles in the 60s. So
in outer space?
No, not in outer space, but
yeah, these were in outer space, and it was a V formation of several of them.
But you had hypersonic vehicles that did enter outer space in World War II. So before when you make a statement like that, I got to kind of grab it to put it in context.
I mean, they could have been ours for all I know. I'm just telling you what I heard that,
Well, I'm always
according to public knowledge, we're not supposed to.
I spent 3 seasons in Antarctica, not the entire continent. Unfortunately, I did get a chance to go all the way around the continent, and I've seen and heard a lot about it. Unfortunately, none of this has ever. I never saw the evidence of it, but I always find it interesting. I think there's more going on there than we will ever confess to.
And I didn't hear enough to connect the dots between the top secret stuff I heard about is the same stuff that Linda Howe's talking about. I don't know. I know that there's scientists there. That's pretty much all the people that are there. And obviously there's going to be some technology that's going to be top secret. So, I mean, there's that as far as a disclaimer. I just think that I do believe in our future that as part of the strong delusion deception, we're going to find highly advanced otherworldly technology, and that will feed into it. But the thing is, the whole reason I wrote this book is because I saw that disclosure from the Navy in 2020, and I'm like, hearing about these people from the Pentagon freaking out, Christians from the Pentagon freaking out, and I'm like, you know what? You can believe in this, and you can understand this, and there really can be advanced technology buried in the earth and still believe in the Bible. You don't have to ditch being a Christian just because you're being confronted with these things that you can't reconcile it. Because the Bible actually says that Satan, when he was Lucifer, once ruled as a king, and he was in charge of as a king, he had an entire civilization, a kingdom. And it says in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, there's just mark those down and read them and meditate on those. Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. It talks about a time when Lucifer was a king and walked in the Garden of Eden. That has to predate Adam and Eve. You can't have Adam and Eve being given dominion over the earth and then this other king over here at the same time. So that kingdom, and that was when Lucifer, before he sinned. So that's a long time ago. And the whole 6 days of all creation, no, I'm an old earth theorist. That's another thing that I changed. When I wrote Aliens the Bible, I believed that 6,000 years is roughly the age of the earth and that God created all things. Now I understand it completely different, and part of that comes from studying the Hebrew. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Done. They're made. They're done. And then he populated everything. God entered into time, space, in the person of Jesus. He populated the cosmos with life. And then it was like that for millions, maybe billions of years. And angels lived in peace and harmony. And Satan actually was Lucifer and had a kingdom here on this planet and probably spanned the cosmos, probably had His civilization went to Mars, probably Saturn, and another planet that I think used to be in the asteroid belt but blew up. And that's called the exploded planet hypothesis, and I mentioned that in my book. But it talks about in the Bible how Rahab, a fire came up from in the center of Rahab, and most people interpret Rahab to be synonymous with what happened to Egypt, but I think it has an earlier precedent with a planet that Satan had like a stronghold there. And when Michael came to overthrow Satan, or Lucifer, he blew up his planet, and a chunk of that planet hit Earth, and a chunk of it hit Mars, wiped out Mars, whatever was there, and that could be an explanation for the explosion evidence that we're talking about. A chunk of it also hit Saturn and flipped Saturn 90 degrees perpendicular, because the rings of Saturn spin perpendicular to its orbit, which is just weird. And people have theorized, astrophysicists theorized about it, saying it's something obviously hit it and spit it. So there's evidence of this cosmic explosion that happened in this solar system a long time ago.
From what I'm hearing from you, John, correct me if I'm wrong. One, we're moving away from God, and this is Satan's way of using alien and alien extraterrestrials to move us away from God. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other thing you're saying is that, from what I'm gathering, you're partially saying that we're almost in Revelations, or we're in Revelations now.
Oh, we are.
We are. Okay.
Yes.
So,
I mean, artificial intelligence, Revelation chapter 13. I mean, it's all over. There's like a dozen prophecies. Israel becoming a nation again after 2,000 years of nothing. There's a lot of prophecies that are just lining up. And the days of Noah, what we're seeing with all the UAP disclosure and everything, that's returning to the days of Noah. It's another sign.
Okay. The one question I have for you is that if this Revelations is happening and we're seeing this now, ufology is a theme that move us away from God.
Not all of it.
Okay, not all of it, but part of it. Why won't they give us disclosure then? Why doesn't anybody come out and say, folks, this is what's happening? Because what you're saying is the good people should be standing up saying, I don't care what these people say. We need to tell the human race right now what's going on. Right, John?
So,
I mean,
yeah,
you would think that.
Satan is the reason. I would say probably the biggest reason why.
But Satan
it's
doesn't
being
have
held off.
control of. I mean, Satan has powers and he can do this, but we still have free will. God has given us free will, right?
Yes. So
okay,
let me
so
put it to you this way:
will,
if the ETs wanted to show up, we
they
don't
would
have the
show up.
technology or capability to stop them.
Correct.
So they are not doing this, and
We are.
It's because, well, I mean, they could put an end to our not wanting to disclose them just by showing up. They could just,
But why aren't the good guys coming out and saying the story of what we want to hear, disclosure, the truth? Whether disclosure is demonic, revelations, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, whatever it is, there's people holding on to this. And it doesn't matter.
Technology piece. There's a technology piece too.
We've got the national security state up and running full steam. Okay, which means what? If somebody goes against the powers that be, voila, they're gone.
Yep.
They had a heart attack. They had a brain aneurysm.
They commit
Maybe
suicide.
they had committed suicide with 6 rounds of 9mm in the back of their head. That's why.
Yeah. So
may I
we've
ask
had
you?
people keeping it a secret up until 2020, so something is definitely changing.
Hold on 1 second. Martin, please.
Yes, John, I'd like to ask you, I know you were in the back in the studio, in the green room, as they call it, while we had our first hour of the show. And I wondered what you thought about some of the topics. Any of them you want to touch on?
Well, I really like it, appreciate the near-death experience testimony there, and you know, in relation to the multidimensional aspect of reality that you mentioned. When it comes to ETs, yes, they come from other worlds. Yes, they come from other dimensions, because the entire universe is multidimensional. Each planet is a multidimensional construct. Our physical bodies are multidimensional constructs. We have a non-physical spirit integrated with a physical body. In the future, the Bible even says our body is going to be translated, and then we'll become like the angels. Luke 20:36 says that. So we're going to be made whole when we're fixed in the future. And but the universe itself is fractured, and it's split up into a bunch of dimensions, and it's also the universe. So it's both interdimensional and so that, I'd say, is one of the things that kind of sticks out to me, the whole out-of-body experience and stuff. And then how that ties back to the whole ETs and stuff, because the Bible, it's just really interesting, because the Bible tells you so much about so many different things. My first book, Aliens in the Bible, talks about ETs, but I also talk about ghosts and astral projection and all of the paranormal things that I was into before. But I actually research it and show, like, okay, well, here's what the Bible says about these things, and how you can understand a context from a Christian point of view without necessarily just saying, oh, it's all demonic, and refusing to look at anything. And it kind of opens up a can of worms with just so many topics, like the whole thing what you mentioned about Genesis chapter 6. There's a lot more detail of that in the book of Enoch, and then also in the book of Jasher about these Nephilim. Here's an interesting tidbit. These Nephilim were hybrid human and angel, but they didn't stop with just humans. They messed around with all kinds of things. According to Greek legends, among others, these beings were so powerful they could shapeshift. And so I think they shapeshifted and turned into animals and mated with animals too. And so that you had two different kinds of Nephilim. You had human angel hybrid, and then some of them were giants, as the Bible talks about, and they were the most formidable. But you also had these human animal hybrids. So you see those also throughout all these different mythologies and stuff. I mean, Set, the Egyptian god, dog head. Baal, it was a bull's head in man's body. Centaurs, Minotaurs, all these different things. So that's an interesting tidbit, because you have all of this whole range of cryptids that spawn from those Nephilim.
Well, speaking about the book of Enoch, that is one of the forbidden books of the Bible, so-called forbidden book. Now, the Council of Nicaea, okay, there was a time, John, when I considered, when I was in my teens, entering the ministry. So I read and reread the Bible, okay, quite a bit. I had a lot of questions for it, but the history probably I loved the most. But during the Council of Nicaea, okay, the Emperor Constantine saw, and this is my take on it, Christianity as a controlling mechanism for the great unwashed masses. And many of those books were arbitrarily kicked out because they didn't adhere to the overarching, basically, message that the powers that be at that time wanted to project. What is your take on those forbidden books of the Bible?
Yeah, so the book of Enoch lost the vote by 1 vote, I read. Now, I didn't go and research and confirm that, but it was almost included, and it is actually referenced in the book of Jude. So it's right there. And in the Ethiopian Bible, it actually still is. I mean, they said, Council of Nicaea, never mind. We're still including that book.
We're not playing by that decision.
Yeah, and I think they really missed out on that. And basically, the whole part about angels mating with humans, it's sort of, they were like, we don't know how to deal with that. And they took a hard right from the early church, because the early church, they did believe that angels did cross with humans, that they were physical beings. And I really delved into this more from a scientific perspective, because here I'm like reading the Bible, with all this science in my head and new agey type stuff, but more of an analytical scientific frame of mind when I read it for the first time. And I'm wondering, why would an angel be even attracted to a human? It's not like I'm looking at a fence post and then suddenly getting aroused. I mean, if there's no anatomy for that, if it's not built into me, it just wouldn't be there. So how are they aroused? So I started asking these questions. I couldn't get a suitable answer from any Christians that I talked to. And I finally I had an epiphany. If Adam and Eve were created as pseudo-immortal when they were first created, they had to eat from the tree in order to stay alive. And then they had sex, but they were not angels. Jesus said, after we get translated, we will be like the angels, which neither marry or they are not given in marriage. So they'll be this new higher form. Translation, therefore, is a type of metamorphosis that humans were originally designed to go through. So if Adam and Eve never sinned, they would have become like angels and then not reproduced anymore. And that's where angels came from.
We're rapidly coming up to the end of it. So I want to first thank all my hosts as we roar up to the top of the show. Very interesting show, a lot of interesting parts. There was a question that came up. Did Paul see an alien? And if he did, what does that mean for Christianity? While you think of the answer on that, I want to thank everybody for participating in the audience as well. I know that it throws a lot off. But I think, John, the conclusion you have is one of the conclusions I came to, that all of this is interconnected, that all the activity of what we're talking about. And I will always say that man created the Bible, inspired by God, no doubt in my mind. But it is a book of faith. Just because it is a book of faith doesn't mean it doesn't have evidentiary pieces on there. And I think that Don would understand where I'm coming on this, because we've talked about this in the past as well. So I'd like to leave you the last couple of minutes before we drop out of the show. And Walt, you and I will be talking, and we'll be getting ready for a show dedicated just to this topic in your work. But thank you all, and I wish everyone a great part. John, take us on.
Okay, first of all, my website is my name, johnmyler.com. And anybody that has questions, that they can email me, and I'll answer personally, jmilor@yahoo.com. And you guys, if any of you guys email me, I'll email you my books, and then you have for free. You could read them at your leisure. Regarding the question, did Paul see an alien? Probably. So what is an alien? I talk about that. I believe that aliens and angels are the same thing. There are faithful angels and there are fallen angels. So there's good aliens and there's bad aliens. But there's also beings that are in the heavens that were like Adam and Eve, that they didn't sin, but they're still mortal and they're still reproducing. And they became really advanced societies, and they're able to travel here. There's probably also aliens that were like us in the same boat as us, and they sinned. They've, the dragon dragged a third of the stars from the sky, deceived countless minions out there. If they were like Adam and Eve, they would have become mortal like us, but possibly very advanced nonetheless. They might actually be coming here to find out about Jesus. So, you won't hear that from any ancient aliens show. But I think it's a very distinct possibility that angels could be coming here to find out, like, what's up with Earth. We hear that God actually, the creator of the universe, because he's no mystery to the glorified beings that are out there. They actually go to his planet, which is in the northern hemisphere. The Bible refers to it in 3 different places. It's a physical location in the universe. That's where God has his capital throne. And the angels know about this. but they don't want to let anybody know. The fallen ones don't want us to know these things. Instead, they're going to spin this whole other theology about it and deviate from the Bible and get you so much truth that part of you is going to say, oh, I know that there's got to be truth to this. I could feel it, because
John,
most
I
of the
gotta
lie
grab
will be
you.
true.
We're at the end of the show. I thank you, and it's been a pleasure to have you, and thank everyone on the show, and see you next week. Happy Easter to all, and those that are celebrating Ramadan, a safe conclusion to Ramadan as well.
Happy Easter.
Thank you, John.
Happy Easter.
Thank you, gentlemen.